All right. Hi, Peter. Hi, Keith. Thank you for joining me here today on Vonvo.com. It is February 17th, 2013, and I just want to go over a few quick rules before we get started. Just so you know, right now this conversation is being recorded. After the recording's completed and the discussion's complete, we'll be uploading the video to YouTube. Is that okay with both of you?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Great. And then second rule is here at Vonvo, we want our discussions to stay both civil and valuable. We don't want there to be any personal attacks against anyone. Are you guys fine with those rules?
Hey, we only do that on Facebook. Come on.
Anonymously.
Yeah, anonymous. Yeah, I agree absolutely.
Okay, great. So let's jump right into it. For those who are watching in our audience right now, Keith, could you give
Good morning, Nick.
could you give a quick background of yourself, Keith, for our viewers, and just tell us a little bit why you're so passionate about this subject, and then Peter, you can go ahead and do the same thing.
All right. My background as it relates to this issue is I'm just a guy. I'm a citizen. I'm not any expert. I'm a member of, but I'm not speaking on behalf of any gun rights or civil rights organizations. I'm just me. My background is I am a U.S. Navy veteran with 2 honorable discharges. I've always been a patriot. I believe in and I have sworn an oath to support, uphold, and defend the U.S. Constitution. And I stand by that oath. I don't take it very lightly. I am a person who believes in many things are black and white. And so if you say something to me, I take it for what it is. In the context of this discussion, as it relates to the U.S. Constitution, my position is that the Second Amendment to our Bill of Rights is absolute, and it's very clear. I don't even know. To my mind, this discussion was settled in 1781 when the Second Amendment was ratified and adopted. So that's where I come from. Thank you.
Great, and Peter?
Now, Keith, I understand you're in Chicago.
Yeah, about 4 miles north of Chicago. Actually, it's Waukegan, Illinois.
Okay.
But I'm originally from Chicago, and yeah, you say Chicago, we'll accept it.
Okay. Well, and now you'll have a better idea than Max that I'm originally from Chicago. I'm from the High Park Kenwood area of Chicago. My father was a professor of law at the University of Chicago, and you know, the home that I grew up in is about a block away from the home that Obama lives in today. I'm now a resident of Canada, which has more to do with my work than with anything related to leaving the country for any other reason. In my experience, growing up on the South Side, I lived on 48th Street, so I was a block south of 47th Street in Chicago. Certainly a lot of violence took place there when I was a child. That half a block, which has now been gentrified, that was to the north of us, was vacant lot. I experienced, by the time I was 25, I knew of more people who had died as a result of firearms and guns than I did from accidents or other illnesses that might take out people under the age of 50. Among those that were lost at that time was the daughter of the boxer Joe Louis, who was a year or two ahead of school. After we had graduated, she married somebody who, unfortunately for her, he had some involvement in drugs, and they were killed in their bedroom one night. And another was the younger brother of my brother's best friend, who at the time was living, I believe, in California, and one of his neighbors got rowdy while his mother was visiting, and he went to knock on the door to ask them to quiet down, and was shot point blank at that time. And I believe that there is a sculpture somewhere, either in Chicago or in California, made from confiscated guns in honor of his particular demise. So they were both relatively high profile, but the others were for any number of sequences. I also have a cousin who chose to end his life with a firearm, and that certainly was a devastating experience for the family. So that's the basic background. I see guns, not in a, I don't condemn them in any way, shape, or form, but I certainly see them as a potential threat when they are misused and abused. And my experience has been witnessing that on a number of levels. While I was still in Chicago, and it was eventually resolved, there was street violence on the level that certainly would justify some of the arguments for carrying weapons. It was a band of 3 or 4 young black youth running around with sawed-off shotguns, and I think they on their rampage were successful in killing 5 to 8 people. I can't recall specifically. It was back in the late '60s, and I mean there are sites on my walk to school from home that are marked by the fact that the way we might mark a traffic fatality now. I mean, there was never a sign, but you were aware that this was a spot where there was an attempted robbery, and this is where somebody died, or this was a store where the proprietor was killed, and various things. Certainly, the late '60s in Chicago was a very violent time, and when I left the city in '74, was it '74? No, sorry, '78. Chicago had a very high homicide rate at that time. More recently, I happen to have gotten involved on behalf of some conservative politicians in Canada, in which happened during the time that the Canadian government was putting their gun registry in place. They have since abandoned that. That was about 15 years ago, I think. And I was surprised at the time by how vocal the anti-control position was, because it struck me as fairly common sense legislation. And then, of course, the recent events in Sandy Hook sort of brought all of this back up. Sandy Hook is a clarion event. It certainly is not. It's just sort of the straw on the camel's back in terms of activity and action. So I've been recently more active, and actually acquainted with me through my more active position on this. And I've just taken time to dwell into the subject. I think we can have a fairly meaningful conversation on the Bill of Rights aspect of things, because I've got a fairly thorough background with respect to the First Amendment, and would view the controls that are in place on the First Amendment as germane to potential controls on other amendments.
Right.
So I'll leave it off at there, and then let Max or yourself direct where we want to go.
Okay. And as we did previously in our last conversation that I participated in, I think maybe it would be a good idea to kind of set I hate to say ground rule, but the parameters of the discussion, because it's so multifaceted. We can start talking concealed carry and end up talking, armor-piercing bullets that don't exist for the most part. But so let's set a parameter of what the specific topic related to gun control or civil rights would be. And we'll go from there.
Well, I think I had a conversation yesterday with a gentleman who was in Indiana that we recorded as well. And he as well was ex-military, and one of his justifications on it was the idea, the concept that the Second Amendment exists in order to protect the citizen from the government. That in my view is a newer interpretation. I've seen the quotes from Jefferson and the rest, but they have to go back and look specifically at what was taking place between the Republicans and the Federalists at the time, and much of Jefferson's objection was towards the return to monarchy and things that were a risk at that time. I want to note that you make the comment, and this is a question I put to you because you're past military, retired military. You have sworn an oath to protect and uphold the Constitution of the United States, as has every other service personnel of the United States, and the officers specifically. So I go, okay, you've got that as a structure. The structure of the Constitution is in the support of a republic, and from a legal perspective, from a practicality, we've had, even with the election in 2000, which would be the most contested that we've had recently. There was a peaceful transition of government. The transfer of power between Washington and Adams was peaceful. The transition of power between Adams and Jefferson, which was a shift between Federalists and Republicans, was a peaceful transition of government. What happened in Germany when Hitler came to power at the time of the Weimar Republic was a military coup, in effect. I mean, he brought about, it was a political coup. He had his own gangsters come in, and he very quickly, from the time he was elected to the time he declared himself the leader, he eliminated his opposition. It was a very, very specific and telling action that defined that. So my question to you is, with the fact that that oath exists in the first place, where is the? I mean, yesterday Joseph mentioned Wounded Knee as an example. Certainly, Kent State's an example. It's a different example, but it's an example. I mean, there's any number of cases of the government or members within the government at different times acting improperly. But on a broader scale, where is the threat? Where is the genuine threat of that?
I don't know that there is a genuine and specific threat that directly correlates or simulates those instances that you've described historically. However, there is the potential for those things to occur. And I'm sure you're familiar with the fact that in so many instances, including Nazi Germany, including the Turks against the Armenians, and I think Uganda, there's some place in Africa, in Cambodia, in Vietnam, in China, first moves that the oppressive government makes is to collect firearms, right? Restrict firearms, heavy penalties, and so forth. And so it's not something that happens immediately. It's transitional. But keeping in right, and so the oppression doesn't come before the guns are confiscated. It comes after they're confiscated. And let me finish, Peter.
Okay.
So one of the things that separates us, Americans, from all other peoples is our form of government and our declaration that we acknowledge the existence of certain inalienable rights, meaning that you can't put a lien on those rights. The rights exist. And we specifically state in our contract amongst the unions that formed our nation, the Constitution is a contract. And the contract says we'll form this new federal government and we're going to set some limitations on it. And one of the limitations on federal government is the government may not infringe on the right of the citizens to keep and bear arms. That makes us Americans unique. No other nation in the world that I am aware of has such a specific declaration of the existence of a right that has been codified within their constitution.
So I'm going to go back. I'm going to first go back. Let's address Turkey and Nazi Germany and Uganda and all of the various oppressive regimes. Right off the top, let's accept the fact that you have presently in the world, you have what we can refer to as liberal democracy, and we're not talking left and right conservative. We're talking liberal. You have liberal and you have illiberal democracy, and then you have theocracy and you have autocracy and you have all the other forms of dictatorship and the rest.
And you have another. Don't leave out the other, and that is the constitutional republic.
No, we are a liberal. We fall under the category of liberal democracy. That's
so this discussion
in the functioning of how it works. So you have Venezuela, for example, which is a liberal democracy. There's one party. Russia is an illiberal democracy. We have the liberal version of democracy. Canada has a liberal version. Australia and England. Okay. One of the tenets of the argument about the oppression is that this oppressive government. We have within our legal structure, within all that contract you talk about, within the structure of the Supreme Court, within the very detailed elements within the Constitution that deal with impeachment, we have within the structure, and the military is sworn to uphold that structure, we have the mechanisms to deal with oppressive leaders, somebody who violates the tenets of the Constitution in such a manner that you would end up with illegal actions such as seizure. Because the other amendment in the Constitution that protects you is you're protected under what is the fourth from illegal search and seizure. The argument itself is based on the argument itself is based on a factor of fear that does not take into account, and it only focuses solely on that second half of the Second Amendment, and doesn't look at the rest of the amendments in the Bill of Rights, which protect you. We have freedom of speech, we have freedom of assembly, we have freedom of religion. So we have an ability within our much broader structure for you and I to have this very conversation without any impeachment. So
what if the discussion was about? What if the discussion instead of being about the right to keep and bear arms was the right to practice a religion other than, say, top three: Judaism, Catholicism, and Christianity. Other than that, you have.
First Amendment. Would you be so quick to suggest that the government has the right to suppress our
First Amendment, as you are, that they suppress our.
I believe that we should be allowing the Jim Joneses of the world to be serving Kool-Aid to their congregation. I mean, there is a.
I don't think that you should not allow the Jim Joneses of the world to speak and to congregate. But what you're suggesting, an act of violence, an act of murder, is illegal and immoral. And yes, we'd agree. No one should be allowed to commit murder. But that's not what we're talking about.
And let's establish the baseline of our conversation. There is. You and I both are fully aware that with or without any regulations, we are not going to end the issue of homicide. That's not going to happen. We're not going to end the issue of suicide. What we may successfully do, and certainly what my objective here is, because it has very little to do with the physical guns themselves. Mm-hmm. What my objective here is to find solutions that will bring about a decrease in the numbers. We lead the world in suicides. We're in the center of the pack as far as homicides go with relation to firearms specifically. And then we have cities like New Orleans, which certainly in its post-Katrina state, I don't know if the statistic is true today as it was then, if it was a country, it would be the second highest murder rate in the world relative to firearms.
So Peter, the point is here, if there are a group of people committing crimes, passing laws that affect people who commit those crimes is not going to affect those who do.
Of background checks, right? My understanding at the present, from material I've seen, is that roughly 1% of the gun dealers are supplying the majority of the illegal firearms in the U.S. And that some 68% of the illegal guns coming into Chicago are coming across state lines from as far
Where else would they come from? You can't buy them in Chicago.
No. I hear that. I understand that. But let's look at the mechanics of that and see where there's possible solutions. 32% come from dealers outside of Chicago, and in fact, the state, although it's still got 4 or 5 on the list of highest regulations, has fewer in place. Chicago's confiscating 6 times the number of guns that New York is. I mean, it's a porous situation in Chicago with respect to illegal firearms. In real estate, they have an issue with mortgage fraud, and the imposition of the straw buyer was determined to be one of the major ways in which mortgage fraud was being perpetrated. And certainly in firearm sales, that appears to be part of the deal as well. Is that there are straw buyers, people going out posing as good people who have a clear record being used to purchase.
And you cannot stop that.
Well, but you can't. The ATF and the CDC and FBI are currently inhibited from doing proper data research by riders that were attached to other.
Peter, here's my point. Here's my point. If you set a certain group of parameters that allow someone to legally purchase, possess, own, keep a gun, and they meet those,
you can't.
You've done your duty.
Yes, no, I understand.
Now there's nothing you can do that will stop that person from giving or selling that gun to someone else. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do as an absolute that will stop someone from breaking in and stealing that gun. So yeah, the idea of background checks to at the front end eliminate the possibility of someone like a felon or a teenager from walking in and buying a gun retail. Yeah, that's absolutely, that works. But regardless, whatever person meets the legal requirements, they purchase via the legal process the gun. Once that gun is in their possession, you can't stop them by passing a law. Hey, you can't give that gun away. You're not going to stop them from doing it.
All right. Let's address some of the things, because I mean, what I'm finding in the arguments that are being thrown back, some of the points are legitimate, but you're basically using a blunderbuss approach to the issue with respect to stolen guns. In the 5-year period, in the 5-year period of 2007 to 2011, 1.4 million firearms were stolen in the U.S. So it's about 280 units a year. That is a fraction of the firearms that are illegal firearms. That is a small fraction. So the argument that the guns are being stolen and there will be one, it's a little bit like saying, okay, we're going to put drunk driving laws in place, and people are still going to drink moonshine. It is or it is not a reality. It is a portion of the equation. It is not the whole equation. And the issue with just let me finish now, my turn. The issue with the whole argument that is being thrown up in objection to gun control, and the issue with the argument that's being thrown in place by perhaps the Feinsteins in Washington, is these absolutist arguments. The purpose of our having a conversation is to find areas within the structure of this where there are possible solutions. The objective is not to clear out 100% criminal activity or suicide activity. The objective here is to reduce what's currently taking place, the 30-some thousand people that are dying annually as a result of something to do with firearms, the 250,000 people that are being injured, and finding some way of reducing that.
But every proposed solution is directed at people who are not committing the crimes, and there are no solutions. I haven't heard one solution. I have not heard one proposed solution that says, well, if the guy commits crime, if he does a murder with a pistol, that he should be executed, or that he should receive instant life.
That becomes an entirely different discussion.
Okay, so Peter, let me put this in context for you. I own a number of guns. My guns are never used to commit crimes. They don't get up and load themselves and out and rob people or shoot people. It doesn't happen, right? But let's say there's a guy that lives next door to me who does. He takes his gun and he goes and shoots someone or he robs someone. What you're suggesting is to put restrictions on me because of what he did or is doing. And you're not offering anything that would mitigate the actions of the individual who's committing the crimes.
Back here for a second. The fact of the problem is that you have, within the time since JFK was assassinated, we've had more people die as a result of a firearm, more civilians than all of your military brothers in arms in all of the wars in which the country has fought. More people. That is not acceptable. We're a democracy.
We are not a democracy. We are a republic, a constitutional
we're a republic. It's a republic democracy, a democratic republic. It's a constitutional. That's language.
So we have laws.
The fact of the matter,
and one of the laws says I have a right to keep and bear arms. So
that's language. You have, but if you're going to hold me to the language of the Second Amendment is a well-regulated militia.
Break it down. Well-regulated means what?
Well-regulated means governed.
In
doesn't
good
mean that your neighbor,
working order.
It does
in
not
good
mean that your neighbor
in
can go out
good order.
and form a militia.
In good order. So how can we have a well-regulated militia if the people's right to keep and bear arms is suppressed?
At the end of the day, you can get drafted and they hand you a weapon. So
that is not a militia. That is an army.
Well, I agree.
The militia is the citizenry, and the militia provides their own weapons.
Then you need a musket because the militia asks for a musket. I mean, if we want to get into
it did not say musket. It said arms.
The militia
asks. The AR-15 is the modern musket. Okay. So if you're going to use that logic, then this internet and texting and cell phones are not covered by the First Amendment. You would say, to use your argument, then only the ancient printing press will be covered by the First Amendment.
The First Amendment has limitations. The First Amendment has limitations. You can't walk into a theater, Joseph, and yell fire.
That's right.
You can't do it, right? You can't. I can't start making a whole series of anti-Semitic statements and publishing them. I can, but I'll encounter restrictions on that. There's a variety of things.
And why would that be?
You and I can't. We can have lawful assembly, but we can't get 500 or 600 or 1,000 of our friends to show up in Skokie and dress up as the Ku Klux Klan.
And why would that be?
Without applying
why can't you do that? Because it poses a public nuisance and a public danger.
Because it imposes upon the rights of others.
It does not. It does not. If I walk into a theater, Peter, you went down this road. Let's continue. If I can't walk into a theater and yell fire, it's because I pose a danger to the public, to others, right?
Okay, so you can walk
the mere possession of a firearm does not pose a danger. Doesn't happen.
Okay, the gun itself may not pose a danger. The hands in which the gun does do.
Right. Agreed.
The hands with it. Okay, so you got an individual who owns a weapon or has access to a weapon.
Yes.
What qualifies them? Your 14-year-old son or daughter can't go out and step into an automobile without a learner's permit or a license. Registration is simply identifying that you are in fact who you claim to be. You are Joseph. You live in Chicago. You're law-abiding. You pay your taxes. Whatever else. Right? You are who you
feel the same way about voter ID?
Pardon me?
Do you feel the same way about voter ID?
I find, you know what? With respect to that question on the fact that somebody has a library card should serve that. The fact is, in my conversation yesterday with Joseph, we got to on the question of registration and all the rest of it, and what the government knows. The fact of the matter is, and you know this without batting an eye, the government knows whatever it chooses to know about you. They have complete access to your bank accounts. They have complete access to everything going on in your life. They can tap your internet. They can record this conversation. Should they choose to do that? They have to do that with warrant. If you put in place registrations and the background checks that they're talking about, and you make it possible for the research aspects of the various sources of research to look at this. I mean, for example, you and I, as men of our age, run the risk of prostate cancer. There is thorough research on what may be the causes of that. We don't have anything that remotely resembles that with respect to firearms. The number of youth that are dying as a result of firearms, either through violence and homicide, and the number
Because
that
you're
are
looking
committing
for,
suicide,
you're
there are
looking for a
just a moment. There are
scientific answer
specific
to
reasons
a
why
common
that's
sense
happening.
question.
Pardon me?
You're looking for a scientific answer to a common sense question. Bad people do bad things. And the only way you're gonna stop that is you have to provide a deterrent and a punishment for doing an incentive not to do.
Yeah, maybe
And that incentive can't be penalizing those who don't do it. It has to be an incentive for those who do, who are inclined to commit a crime.
Where is the penalty? Where is the penalty, Keith? Where is the penalty in you applying either on a renewable basis, like you do your driver's license, or the license to bear arms, and that you, when you have a transaction, can identify to the dealer that you are in fact bona fide, and not a risk to society. Where is the
where do you base the necessity for me to pass a test and meet other requirements and pay a fee to the government, any government, to exercise a right? Ownership of firearms is not a privilege. It's not a privilege.
Well, let's go back to our.
So what? If I have a right to speak freely, or a right to worship as I choose, and I have a right to keep and bear firearms, why do I need a license and permit and fees and pass a test for one but not the others? In the 30s, 40s, and 50s, or back in Jim Crow era, there was something called the poll tax, and you had to pass a test, and you had to pay a fee to go vote. But we said you can't do that because you have a right to vote. Well, I have a right to keep and bear arms. Why do I have to prove to the government and get government permission to do something that I have a right to do?
You have the right. I think it's not the case of you having the right. It's the case of the firearm having the right to give it to you.
Don't we have a right to engage in commerce? What about my property rights?
But you're
if I want to give you my cell phone, can I give you my cell phone?
Can you go to the store and buy codeine? No, you have to do it with a prescription.
Do I have a right to buy codeine?
You have the right to liberty.
Convoluted, doesn't it?
Pardon me? You have the right to life. No, it's not. The fact of the matter is, you can sit back and you can say, no, you can't touch this. You can't touch this constitutional Bill of Rights article. And I don't disagree. I don't disagree with the premise. However, you can have reasonable discussion and find where the limits may or may not exist. And the fact of the matter is, don't wait, Keith.
Totally agree. If you put that on those who are doing the wrong.
Well, the whole premise here is you have to start at a spot. You have to establish where right and wrong is, right? So the government can't come along and say, well, I'll have to wear pink shirts, right? Same principle. We can all say, no, we don't want to wear pink shirts. But what the government is trying to do is to some degree separate the wheat from the chaff and be able to start narrowing in on the chaff, the problem. You can't narrow in on the problem if you don't know what the problem is and you don't know where the problem is.
Exactly.
So the fear that is expressed. Well, yeah, you identify the problem. What part of the problem is that more people have died as a result of firearms in the time since Kennedy's assassination to today.
That's not the problem.
That is a problem. That's a very significant problem.
The problem is that people are committing crimes. Certain people commit crimes.
Crime is only a portion of the problem.
Guns are.
There are 30,000. No, Keith. There are 30,000 people that have died 31,513 in 2011, according to the CDC. And the numbers were similar for 2012. The homicides with respect to firearms were less than 10,000. Okay, so you've got 20+ thousand people that are dying as a result of firearm-related incidents that are not criminal. What are you going to do about that? 2/3 of the people who are dying are not criminal. 2/3 of the people who are wounded are not criminal. 1/2 of the people who are wounded need extended care. You have a member of Congress who's been in a wheelchair since he was 16, and he got wounded in a police station because of the mismanagement of a firearm. There is a problem. That's a problem. You have a 10-year-old daughter. Just you have a 10-year-old girl
who uses the weapon. You have to do something about the people who are making those choices.
Okay, that's that. So what do we do about that?
People drive drunk. You can't take away my car because somebody else drives drunk in theirs.
But you can take away his car.
Yes. So go to that
criminal. Okay, well let's take that premise. Let's use that premise. If somebody drunk who drives drunk, the government can take away his car, why can't we not take away his guns?
You should. Absolutely.
Okay, there we've got a place to agree. Okay, well there we've got a place to agree. So
if he does a robbery,
but now we're violating on the absoluteness of your argument. On the absoluteness of your argument, we're violating his Second Amendment rights. That's the point. We have to find the avenues to do this. It has nothing to do with you and Joseph and the vast majority of firearm owners or the vast majority of drivers who are legal. It has everything.
Then why do you keep talking about things that affect legal owners?
No, what we're talking about is building a structure within which we can take the guns away from the drunk driver.
You can't do that by taking it away from the guy that doesn't drink.
Well, who's taking it away from the guy who doesn't drink?
That's what you're proposing. Everything you propose.
I'm not proposing that.
Everything that
that's fallacy. The fallacy of the gun control argument from the pro-gun side is that everybody's out here to take all the guns away. I could care less. You can have as many guns as you want as long as you're capable, competent, and authorized to have them. I have no issue with that.
And the government is going to define who is capable, competent, and responsible.
Well, they certainly do that when you weld. They certainly do that when you drive. They certainly do that when you drive a truck. They certainly do that when you scuba dive.
Peter, none of those things are an acknowledged, codified right reserved to the individual by the Constitution of the United States.
All right. So then we're back to we have a drunk who uses a gun. How do we deal with that? Because you've just walked up against the very wall that says we can't deal with it.
Death penalty, eviction. Send a message.
Oh, great, fantastic. Then you have the other 12 Bill of Rights issues that come into play that protect that individual.
Oh, then what do you do? Nothing. Just have anarchy.
Well, there we go. There's a solution. You're proposing that we live.
I think we kind of hit a brick wall with this line of discussion. Is there another?
Well, I think I'm seeing all the remarks on the bottom. I'm in a room by myself here, but the fact of the matter is, let's go back. We found one avenue that says yes, there's room to move. The point here is, first of all, the perception on the pro-gun side that the anti-gun side is, let's take away the guns, let's get rid of the amendment, the rest of it. I accept the Supreme Court decision 2008, D.C. versus Heller. I accept the Chicago versus Miller decision in that it applies nationally. Okay, it's very clear within D.C. Heller that the premise that the Supreme Court has chosen to support is self-defense of the home. No big issue. There are very specific legal issues with respect to where self-defense becomes something other than self-defense. That becomes a whole fine line. I am of the view, and I have expressed this in other conversations, a firearm is a tool. The Constitution has in effect put the right to bear arms in place as a tool. It's a tool for self-defense. It becomes a weapon as self-defense, but it's a tool.
Right.
The well-regulated militia is an organized event, not a disorganized event. And certainly in 1781, when it was ratified, the United States was a different environment with respect to wildlife and other external threats and internal threats today. You being a retiree from the Navy know how large the U.S. Navy is in terms of protecting us from foreign powers. So there is a point at which a firearm, in its use, in how it is misused, because we're not talking about its proper use. We're not trying to, beyond the fact that you can't put a gun range in a nursery school. We're not talking about its proper use. We're talking about its misuse and abuse, and regulation and other activities to deal with misuse and abuse and illegal use, okay, and the illegal transfer. But you have to set up a playing field in which that happens. So background checks is part of that playing field. It is not taking away anybody's rights. It is not looking into anybody. They're protected. They're protected by the Constitution. Just let me finish, please, Keith. They're protected by the